Hi, everyone at the Board of Directors of the Central Valley Business Federation. This is Chris Micheli in Sacramento, and my sincere apologies for missing your board meeting. I was a few minutes tardy, and you guys ended a little early. I blame my assemblyman who had me on to do what was supposed to be about a 45 minute podcast, and we went a solid hour, and I ran back to my office to try to join you, but I was a few minutes late. And so I apologize profusely, but I tried recording this presentation that I was otherwise going to give to all of you. Basically, an overview of the 2023 California legislative session that wrapped up near midnight on Thursday, September the 14th. Governor Gavin Newsom had until Saturday, October 14th to act on the bills sent to his desk, but for the second time in 3 years, this year, 2023, and 2 years ago, 2021, the governor actually concluded his work a day early, the evening of Friday, October 13th. In all, 1,046 bills reached the governor's desk this year. He signed 890 and vetoed 156, which is a total veto rate of 14.9. I always get asked, how does that compare? So last year, 1,166 bills got to his desk. So, 120 odd more. He signed 997 and vetoed 169. So last year's veto rate was 14.5%. So very, very similar. I actually broke this information down a little further. So of the 85% of the bills that were signed that reached his desk, 63 were from the Assembly, 63%. 83% of the ABs signed were authored by Democrats. Of the 15% of the bills that were vetoed, 67% of them were from the Assembly, and 88.5% of the ABs that were vetoed were authored by Democrats. On the Senate side, in terms of signed bills, 37% of the signed bills were SBs, and 81.5% were authored by Democrats. Of the vetoed bills, 33%, a third of them were SBs. 94% of the SBs that were vetoed were authored by Democrats. Again, last year, 2022 session, 85.5% were signed, 14.5% were vetoed. In the 2021 session, that was an anomaly. That was the second year of COVID. So only 836 bills reached the governor's desk. And of those, 92% were signed, 8% were vetoed. The first year of COVID, the legislature knocked the number of bills down, reaching his desk by three quarters. Three quarters. So only 425 bills were sent to the governor. He vetoed 13% of them. Governor Newsom's first year in office, of course, was 2019. Over 1,000 bills got to him, actually over 1,200 bills. And 16.5% veto rate, which ironically was the same rate, 16.5%, that Governor Brown had in his final year in office, Jerry Brown 2.0. Just looking back at the prior governors, in Jerry Brown's 8 years in office 2.0 version, a low of 870 and a high of 1,200 bills reached his desk. He had a low veto rate of 10%, and a high of the 15 or so percent. Schwarzenegger was in office for 7 years. A low of 890 bills and a high of 1,265 bills reached his desk. He had the highest veto percentage of anyone. Low of 22%, high of 35%. Gray Davis's 5 years, a low of 965 bills, a high of 1,455 bills. He had a veto rate of a low of 6% to a high of 25%, just to give you a flavor. The other research I ended up doing was looking at the last 15 years of bills introduced and what happened to them in the two houses. And I think what's really interesting is over the 15 years, among the Senate bills, an average of 760 bills are introduced every year, 760. This year it was 891 in 2023. But of those numbers, two-thirds, 66% of them, passed the state Senate floor. Less than 1.5% failed passage on the floor, very low number. And of course, the remainder of the introduced bills don't reach the floor. The other interesting number, 45% of the bills introduced on average in the Senate over the last 15 years, 45% reached the governor's desk. On the Assembly side, over 15 years, the average number of bills introduced, 1,506. This year, Assembly bills, 1,771. On average, 56% of the introduced bills pass off the Assembly floor, and 44% of them don't reach the floor. The number of bills on average, the last 15 years of Assembly bills reaching the governor's desk, 41%. So 41% of the Assembly bills introduced, 45% of the Senate bills introduced reach the governor's desk. And again, on average, about 85% of them get signed. So that means roughly 4 out of every 5 bills introduced in the California legislature actually reach the governor's desk and get signed into law. That's a pretty high number. Just by comparison, it's about 3 to 5% annually for the US Congress. So just to give you a flavor. Anyways, the 2023 session is now a wrap entirely. And what we have left is the start of the 2024 session on January the 3rd. This is the second and final year of our 2-year session. Historically, the second even-numbered year usually has about 200 fewer bills introduced. So instead of about 2,700, like this year, we're figuring 2,500 next year. And they adjourn August the 31st due to the Constitution. And of course, the other interesting thing for next year is it's a presidential election year. That means we have a March 5th, an early primary, instead of June. And then our general election is November 5th. We'll only have one ballot measure in March. That is on the mental health services funding and how those funds, the so-called millionaires tax, that was originally enacted by the voters in Prop 63 a decade or more ago, how are those going to be allocated going forward? That's Prop 1 on the March 5th ballot. In November, on the November 5th ballot, we could have upwards of a half a dozen or more ballot measures, including 4 placed on the ballot by the California legislature, including ACA 5, SCA 2, ACA 1, and ACA 13. So with that, that's my overview from the California legislative session in 2023 and the main gubernatorial actions. Again, I'm sorry I missed the in-person Zoom for your board of directors, but hopefully this was sufficient. And I wish the best for the Central Valley BizFed come January and the start of the new 2024 California legislative session. We'll talk again soon, I hope. Take care, everyone.